Okay, so today on the workbench we have a PS5 disc edition with a bad HDMI port. But it looks like we're in for a bit more than expected because we have a bad USB-A port as well. Usually I wouldn't worry too much because there's one on the back and one on the front, but I think with this one we're going to get that port done so it can be tidied up and sold on. Well, let's crack into it. Obviously, first step is to get the cover off, and we have a lot of yummy in there. That's just the bottom cover, so we're going to have to do a bit of cleaning. Not looking a whole lot cleaner on the other side, so let's just rip into it and we'll get this board fixed and give it a good clean up. Starting with the 4 screws on the fan. Nice and easy to get out using a security Torx bit, T8 from memory. Cool, fan is unplugged and ready to come out, and wow, she is a dirty one. Yeah, we've really got our work cut out for us today. Some beautiful dust bunnies inside this one. One Phillips screw holding the SSD bay in, pop that out. We've got 10 screws holding the outer shell on, so we'll rip those out and get this cover off. Mid-cover screws are all loose, and I like to leave them in place because they're all different sizes and shapes, and it's a little bit easier than having to figure out which one goes back where. I've got a pretty good idea on obviously where every one goes, but these days it's just a bit of a shortcut. Let's pop those out, and the cover comes off. And we get even more dirt. Some nice big ones. But yeah, no, this console will be looking very fresh shortly. Disk drive out, which is just a case of unplugging one motherboard cable here and a flex cable that you have to push down on the tab and pop it out. Cool, and disk drive comes off. There's nothing actually holding that in except the top cover. Cool, now we have to attack a whole bunch of screws, and we have a moth dead in here. And yeah, we'll get the board out. We have 31 screws holding the motherboard plate down. 31 totally necessary screws where they probably could have got away with 4 or 5. But that's cool, we will whip them out and get this cover off. This is where having an electric screwdriver is certainly a lot more helpful than a manual screwdriver. Cool, so we got all those screws out. Next thing to do is just grab this cover off. We have a flex cable here, flex cable on the front, and another one of these pressure release cables here. Which are usually not too bad to get out once you get the feel for them. Cool, we are out. No damage to that. Good stuff. And pop the antennas off. Which, just for the Wi-Fi, you got 2 for the front, 2 for the back. And the cover is ready to come off. Cool, so top cover is off. Next step is the 2 CPU brackets. One there. One there. Tend to loosen them off one at a time, sort of half and half, just because you don't want the tension all down one side. And 2. And then we've got 3 screws holding the board in. 1, 2, and 3. We'll get these out and we'll get this board out and have a look at the liquid metal. Cool, motherboard is free, and as usual we have a big dry spot in the CPU cooling paste, the liquid metal that these use. Very common in these. It'll generally cause a game to shut down or the console to overheat and beep 3 times. Yeah, so we'll be tidying that up too. So that liquid metal is relatively easy to tidy up. Generally just a dry Q-tip will clean up any of the oxidation, and you just spread it out on both the APU and the die until it looks nice and even. We have one more screw on the top here and two on the bottom, and we'll get this whole center heatsink out just so that we can give it a good thorough clean. Cool, so there we are. Let's just get this heatsink out and have a look at how much more dirt and dust we're looking at. One last thing, forgot this flex is stuck down, so we'll get that free. You don't want to be ripping those because they are for the front panel. Yeah, we have a mess. Woo! Lovely dust bunnies down in the power supply there, and of course all of the rest. Now we'll put the shell aside for now, and we'll get to cleaning that once we've sorted the motherboard out. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take the USB port off the donor board that we have. We have a EDM044, which is a late model Slim, which has a dead APU. So we're going to steal a USB-A port off it. Sorry for the glare. And they look to be similar enough. We'll find out once it's off if it's going to fit. So looking at the back side of these USB ports, they do have exactly the same pin out. We'll get one off and we'll have a look. Now this bit's going to be a bit harder to film because at the moment I don't have a stand for my camera. But the first thing we're going to do is we are going to use I've just got a set of tweezers here with some heat tape on the back. We're going to rest that inside the USB port just to protect the plastic shroud on the inside from taking too much heat and damaging the plastic, because we want to retain this port. We're going to need to flux up the pins, all 4 lead pins, and all of the 9, I think it is, pins that hold the port in. And once that drops free, we will start on the other board. So we've got our fluxed up USB port ready to go. Probably a little bit overkill on the flux, but because it's coming off, it's not too much of a big deal. And this is a donor board, so I'm not overly worried about cleaning it up afterwards. We've put a little bit of extra heat shielding on the underside of this, just to make sure that that internal plastic doesn't take any heat. And we are getting our heat gun ready to 450 degrees. Light airflow, and we will drop this port out. Cool, so that port has now dropped out nice and clean. Pins are all looking beautiful, and we'll get that ready to install in the new board. Now a little tip I've decided to do here is use a dummy USB-A input to just to protect that internal shielding a bit more. It's quite easy to damage the plastic internals of these ports. So it just kind of makes sense to have something blocking it. So we'll just get a first look at this damaged port. It's pretty mangled. There's no way we were getting away with that one. And the HDMI port here, that'll be our next mission. Cool, let's get started with getting this port out. And same applies, just a bit of flux on the top pins here. It should drop straight out nicely, and we'll slide the new one in. I've just popped an extra bit of heat shielding around this other port, just so we don't want any heat to transfer to that other port and damage it. So let's get a bit of flux ready to go on this port. And again, I've used a bit too much, but I will be cleaning it up afterwards. At the moment, my flux is coming out in big puddles, so this is what I'm working with, unfortunately. Cool, so we have that out nice and clean. Everything is looking beautiful. I think we're going to turn the board over and heat it from the bottom to drop the new port in, just so that we reduce the risk of damaging it. So our next step here is just to heat this from the bottom and slot the new port in. Cool, so our new port is installed. The next step is to pop the dummy cable out and give all this flux a good cleanup. So I've just come through with the iron, just having a look and making sure that all these pins have got a nice connection. There was just the one on the end here that needed a bit of touching up. It is nice and healthy now. Now we will come through and get this HDMI port off. Don't fear, I will be putting all of the foam inserts back under the ports when I'm done. They're just better to put on last in case you get a bit of flux or something in there. So I'd just like to come in, have a look at the back of the port and see if there's any unexpected damages. A lot of the time that capacitor there can be knocked off, especially if the port's pushed back as far as it is, but in this case it's not. Cool, we'll just proceed with getting this port off and getting it ready for a new one. Now, not everybody likes to do this, but I like to pre-tin the pins on the HDMI port just to make it go on a bit smoother, and generally it means you don't have to go back through and re-tack any pins to the board. Cool, so we've just lightly tinned up each and every pin on that new HDMI port. Let's get the old one out and the new one in. Same applies, 450 odd degrees, nice and slow. Drop the port out, drop the new one in. So I'm going to try and catch this one on camera, just to get a good shot of the port being removed. 430 degrees Celsius, medium airflow, just on the underside of the board to free up the solder. You'll eventually see a point where the solder has started to melt, and that's especially on the legs, and that's an indication that we're pretty safe to remove without any damage. You definitely don't want to put any force on this because you can rip traces completely off the board. Ripping pads off is not fun, it's a lot of tidy up. We are starting to loosen up. I want to give it a little bit more though, and we are good to go. So that port is now off. This board is looking extremely healthy. No torn pads. We will jump in here and add some leaded solder to the feet. And yeah, we'll slide our new port in. So same idea again, we're just going to heat this from the bottom and drop our prepped port in. I'm actually going to try a similar theory to the USB port, where I'm going to use, it's a bit of an HDMI jig, just to lower it in place, because using tweezers and other tools can be a bit messy. Sometimes you'll slip right at the last moment, and you just don't want to get that port too hot. Cool, so I've just been through and probed every port and checked it, every point, and checked it to make sure that it's all good and everything is nice and solid. So we've just gone through and replaced the padding on each of these ports. Our next step is to prepare the shell, get it all nice and clean. So we have cleaned a monumental amount of dust out of this PS5 housing. The next step is to start getting some of the board components back in so we can get it all tested. So before reassembling the PS5 entirely, we want to power it on and just make sure everything's working the way it should be. And sure enough, we have picture. And we have power on. We are good to go. Let's get it fully assembled and give it a final test. So here we just need to put those 30-something screws back in the metal housing, put the outer housing back on, and fit the fan up. As well as the disk drive, so let's get started on that. Cool, so we have fit all new stickers and we have got everything all ready to go with all of these screws in. Let's get the chassis back together and get this PlayStation tested thoroughly and ready. So we have finished up the repair on this PS5. Everything is working exactly as it should be. We'll give this controller a bit of a clean up and yeah, get it ready for its new home.